Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
If you're on the market for a pair of laceless football boots, then there's probably only one brand that comes to mind, and that's Adidas. They've popularized the concept back in 2014 and offer the most amount of variety. However, they were not the first to do it. Lotto was all the way back in 2006, and here in 2021, they're still doing it and doing it extremely well. Ladies and gentlemen, the Lotto Solista 104 Gravity. Technically the replacement for the Solista 103 Gravity, although aside from some new graphics that admittedly do look really cool, it is the exact same football boot bearing the same $200 retail price. And while I'm not in love with Lotto doing the same thing that we're seeing from all the major brands right now in changing up the graphics and calling it a new model, I do think this is an excellent pair of laceless football boots, and ones that I would rank as second best out of everything that's currently available, and even depending on what you're looking for and what's going to work best for your foot type, possibly the very best option you can get, while also being the least expensive. So if you're interested in learning more about really the OGs of laceless football boot tech with some really cool tricks that only Lotto does, I wish Adidas would implement something like this. Please stick around, watch the entire review, and if you are interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. Now, for those that did not see my review of the Solista 103, the Solista 104 that I'm holding here in my hands is effectively exactly the same. They added this fractal design to the graphics where you have the Lotto branding on the medial side and then the more simple Lotto logo on the lateral side, something I really like the look of, and this kind of color changing effect that the upper has where it goes from this kind of light blue, light green to purple just looks really neat. Not necessarily unique to Lotto, we've seen this from other brands, but I really like the look of this design. However, the upper is pretty straightforward and kind of what we've come to expect from a lot of laceless football boots as they've become more popular again, and that is a knitted upper. This upper entirely being made out of a knit material where you can see these lines kind of streak the length of the football boot, providing more structure where obviously the lines are more raised, the material is thicker, then it's a little bit thinner in between, giving you this nice balance of a material that's soft, offering a really nice feel for the ball without being too padded. So in general, these definitely feel like more of a barefoot sensation, but because it's so soft and sock-like, it moves really nicely with your foot and obviously provides a really good amount of comfort, something you want from any pair of football boots. The laceless element is of course what you're gonna find running across the top of the foot. And it must be said, and I called this out back when these first came out almost 2 years ago, that the design as a whole is pretty similar to what we had on the Adidas Predator 18 and 19 with this elasticated knit for the laceless system itself, and then this fuse kind of bordering that section of the upper where the pattern of the knit actually changes. But something that Lotto did basically over 2 years ago that we're now seeing on Adidas models is putting this layer of fuse material over top of the laceless system, something that is very similar to what can be found right now on what I think is the greatest laceless football boot currently available and really the best laceless boot ever made in the X Speed Flow Plus. Nonetheless, I think Lotto really nailed it here with the shape of this football boot. And again, pending that you have the right foot type, the amount of stretch that's allowed across the top of the foot through this laceless system is somewhat minimized by this fused layer. So while the lockdown isn't perfect, it's certainly not as good as it would be if you had some kind of fastening system like laces to tighten the up or down on your foot. It does a really good job of holding a decent amount of tension, which makes the lockdown and general responsiveness of this laceless football boot above average compared to other laceless options. With all that said, at the end of the day, this is a very simple football boot where you have a knit base to the upper, a padded mesh liner on the inside, which does have a reinforcement liner as well. Then you have a thin layer of elasticated knit across the top of the foot, where some of that stretch is reduced by way of a thin layer of plastic fused to the surface. Other than that, This is very much the same type of sock-like knitted football boot that people have been big fans of basically since 2014 when Nike pushed out the Magista Obra and Superfly 4. Speaking of Superfly 4, you'll notice the collar has somewhat of a unique design that you might have seen before, so I guess it's not all that unique in that it is mid-cut. It has this pattern that is kind of reminiscent of what we saw on the Magista Obra and Superfly, but nonetheless, it's an elasticated knit material that is there for the sake of extending around your ankle and really not doing much else. There's no ankle support provided by this, of course. And then internally, you're gonna find a heel liner that's made out of this soft synthetic suede, plenty of extra padding as we're used to seeing on most laceless football boots. That's not only comfortable, but also does a good job of helping to hold your heel in place. The insole is where things get a little bit interesting, because if we pull that out, you'll notice that it's pretty standard in terms of featuring this really high quality kind of soft material on the surface, and it's made from a single layer of this black foam. But included in the box is this little pouch right here, which if you open it up, you're gonna find a couple different things. First of which is a shoehorn to help with putting the boots on if you need that help. Personally, I never use a shoehorn in any boot that includes it, but they include this. They're double fit insoles, which is actually a really thin insole made out of a slightly firmer orange colored foam that's actually designed to sit underneath the stock insole to reduce some of the volume inside of the boot. It is effectively adjustability for a laceless football boot, something that you won't get with any of the Adidas variations, and something that Lotto implemented back in 2006 on the OG laceless football boot in the Zero Gravity. I really like this idea, and it does legitimately work extremely well if you just need to cut down on a little bit of extra space inside the boot, being that you can't adjust it because of the laceless design. You're increasing the thickness of the insole without making it feel too spongy under your feet. Which brings us to the base of the boot, where you're going to find a sole plate and stud pattern that honestly I think Lotto have hit a home run with. You're gonna notice that it does feature an external heel counter that is kind of reminiscent of what you're gonna find from brands like Adidas, although I wouldn't say that this is a particularly original design. They've just made it kind of more popular with hit models that they've had over the years. But the sole plate itself is made from really high quality plastic. It features their Punto Flex system, which is basically this flex groove through the forefoot, something we've seen on Lotto football boots for as long as I can remember. I'm not sure that it's actually doing all that much, but the sole plate itself has a nice solid feel to it, and there's more of a springback effect than I think you might expect based on how simple it looks. It definitely has a speed boot vibe to it. And then as far as the stud pattern is concerned, it's pretty much all conical studs aside from a couple of them that look like Pac-Men. But nonetheless, the stud pattern itself does a really good job of providing decent traction while still giving you that freedom to twist and pivot. It's kind of like a hybrid of something modern but also more traditional. Reminds me a lot of what you're going to get from the Nike Tiempo series, which on those boots I really like it, therefore I really like it on these as well. Which brings us to the weight, where again Lotto has not disappointed. In a size 9.5 US, you can see the Solista 104 Gravity weighs in at 7.4 ounces, the equivalent of 209 grams, which puts it in the same weight range, if not lighter, than most top-end models that are currently available, as light as most top-end speed boots. And again, despite not really having a speed boot aesthetic, this is a football boot that feels very light on your feet. So here they are on feet, and despite not being from what most people would consider to be a top brand, these really feel like top quality football boots. The knitted upper is soft, it's flexible, it feels good against your foot, and the shape that they've gone for this laceless design admittedly is a little bit unusual in that it's very low volume through the forefoot and toe box area, but the material itself seems to have that little bit of stretch to where they can actually get away with it, and I think overall it benefits the fit of the football boot in that they feel remarkably secure on your feet, being that it is a laceless design. They're a little bit tough to get on, I'll admit that. The opening doesn't stretch all that much because of the reinforcement across the top of the foot, but once the boots are on your feet, that extra reinforcement makes a big difference in terms of making the football boots feel tighter and more secure in general, at least versus what you're gonna find from most other laceless football boot options out there. Plenty of padding through the heel that again I think hold your heel really nicely. A little bit more pressure through the heel than the average football boot, which is typical of a lot of boots with a laceless design, but no real issues in terms of discomfort, and the feel of the sole plate underfoot is also really good. As far as width is concerned, I don't think this is a great option for somebody that has really wide feet, but I do think they'll fit most people. Again, if you also have very high volume through the toes and forefoot, this might be a little bit too snug for you, but for most people, if you want that tighter overall fit, I think these should work out pretty well for you. And then as far as the sizing is concerned, I'm wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and the fit and the length is pretty well perfect. I do end up with that little bit of extra space at the tip, but again, because of that very low volume shape, I don't think going half a size down would actually work that well for me. So true to size for most people is probably what I would recommend. So in conclusion, if I were picking between any of the laceless football boots that are currently available, my top pick would be the Adidas X Speed Flow Plus. I think it's one of the most technically impressive football boots ever made, and in the realm of laceless football boots, I just think it's the best ever. With that said, those retail for $275. These retail for $200, and given their, dare I say, lack of popularity, you can often find them discounted. Certainly if you're buying the previous generation Lotto Solista 3100, which is basically the same football boot, those you can get on sale for less than $150, but it's top end quality, and in my opinion, the second best laceless football boot that's currently available. That includes all the other options from Adidas, as well as the recently released Puma Future Z laceless that was pretty good, but not as good as these. I love to see a brand like Lotto come back and try and take back their title of making the best laceless football boot. And while they haven't quite achieved that with this new model that's not actually new, I still think they've done an excellent job and paid respect to what the brand is still capable of. They used to be really popular, they're not as popular anymore, but they're still making some great football boots.